All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Patricia Meredith, and I am joined today by Rachel. And my first question was going to be, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Kovaciny.
Kovaciny. That's what I was going to
Yes.
guess. Okay. Yeah, I should have just gone with my gut. So this is Rachel K, and I are here to discuss her books. Thank you so much for joining us. If you this is your first time joining on a live chat, I highly recommend that you talk amongst yourselves in the live chat over to the side here on YouTube. Feel free to leave some questions because then when I get a chance, I can pull those in and share those with Rachel, and she and I can answer those questions. So we have some questions that have already come in from her street team, so I'm so excited to get to those. And then I have my own list, so I'm so excited to be here today. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your books.
Okay. I'm 43. I'm a Christian. I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. I homeschool them. And they are, I wouldn't say my beta readers, but pretty close to my beta readers for my books. Like they very much enjoy getting to be part of the writing process and getting to hear maybe a second or third draft and sometimes offer a little feedback. And then they're also part of my proofreading team because they will catch typos that adults just fly right past.
Oh my goodness. That's wonderful.
very handy.
How old are they?
Right now they are 11, 13, and 15.
Wow, that's excellent. Okay. So that was actually going to be one of my questions later was, do you think that your books could be read by younger kids? So absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. So Rachel and I met kind of via Instagram. And we just started chatting, and we've just realized we have so much in common. So I'm so excited to finally meet you in person and talk more. So let's see. So I guess tell us a little bit about your main series. I read Dancing and Donuts, which I absolutely loved. It was so enjoyable. It was so sweet and so delightful. So can you tell us a little bit about that series and maybe how it came to be, that sort of thing?
Okay. So my series is called Once Upon a Western, and sorry.
All right, the sound went out for a second.
My whole series is called Once Upon a Western, and it is gotcha. And connectivity issues happen. My whole series is called Once Upon a Western, and they are fairy tale retellings set in the Old West. So they're non-magical, they're historical fiction, they're Christian fiction. And I kind of started writing them just because I was writing Westerns and I really, really was enjoying them. And I decided to enter a story writing contest for Sleeping Beauty retellings called 5 Magic Spindles, which was from Rugelwood Press back in 2015. And I wrote a Sleeping Beauty retelling as a Western, entered it, won, and went on from there. So that was kind of the beginning of the series.
Wow. Okay. So is that one included in there with a new cover, like part of the matching covers with all your other ones, or is it separate?
So currently you can either buy it as part of 5 Magic Spindles, or you can get a free e-copy by signing up for my author newsletter. And that does have a copy or a cover that's separate, but it is not in print by itself right now. Eventually, when I finish the whole series, I want to put that out with a bunch of the short stories that are kind of part of the series as like a standalone, but also like capstone to the series. So someday.
Okay. So what is technically the first book in the series? Cloaked?
Yes, technically Cloaked is the first, although I'm not writing them in order because they're interconnected, like they're in a shared universe. Sometimes characters will pop up in more than one book, but they're all standalones, and I'm not writing them in specific order. So the first one I published was Cloaked.
Okay.
But then the first one that actually takes place the earliest is Dancing and Donuts.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I absolutely loved Dancing and Donuts. It was so well written. Like from the first line, you capture the Americana Western style, right? Like just the voice, your voice immediately took me to, I think I said like Maverick or Appaloosa, that kind of thing. Very, who's the Zane Grey, that kind of just classic Western sound. And I just love that. It immediately took me into that era and into and you never stepped out of that. You did such a good job of capturing the voice of the era. And so I never thought, oh, that's so anachronistic, right? Oftentimes in historical fiction, you'll come across things where you're like, they wouldn't say something like that. But you were so good about staying true to your history. And yeah, I was going to say, I would definitely say that your books are historical fiction, or even specifically historical mystery. This one was historical mystery. Are the other ones, do the other ones have a mystery?
Not as much so far. So the next one is going to be a retelling of The Wild Swans. And that one is going to be more of a mystery vibe to it, where you've got this heroine who is in trouble and the hero who is a lawyer trying to help her and her brothers deal with this legal problem that they have and figure out how to take care of that. So that one's going to be a little bit more of a mystery again. The other three that are out so far are not.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Well, Dancing in Donuts is definitely set up as a mystery.
Yes.
Like we've got our amateur sleuth and everything.
Yes.
Like I love that. So I'm glad that's the first one I read, because you caught me. So now I've got to read all of them. So, and it's one of my favorite fairy tales is 12 Dancing Princesses. So I wanted to ask, what is your favorite fairy tale?
12 Dancing Princesses is my favorite. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And then like Cinderella, Rapunzel, I really like them too, but
yeah. So what are each of them? So Cloaked is Red Riding Hood.
Cloaked is Red Riding Hood. Dancing in Donuts is 12 Dancing Princesses. One Bad Apple is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And My Rock and My Refuge is Beauty and the Beast.
Perfect. And so what's the next one going to be?
The next one is going to be The Wild Swans, which is a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. Sometimes it's very similar to the Seven Ravens or the Seven Swans or the 12. I mean, there's a lot of different versions of it, but it's the princes and their younger sister and their mom dies, their dad remarries. She hates the boys. She turns them into swans, and the sister can break the spell by weaving coats out of nettles for them.
Okay. Now I do recognize that one. Yeah. There is a
great. It has a lot of different like variations and different names.
But. Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's awesome. So when can we expect that one?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I started writing it actually as a short story, and it was going to be a short story follow-up to My Rock and My Refuge.
Okay.
And it just kept growing and it kept growing. And the short story first draft ended up being like between 15 and 20,000 words. And I was like, this is really long for a short story. And it's practically a novella. And there's more to say yet. Like, this is just the first draft. I write very short, very, very sparse first drafts. And so I knew it was going to grow in the second draft. And I'm like, maybe it should be a book. And maybe I will, this means I will have to rewrite most of it, because I'm going to rewrite it from a different character's perspective. So that it's more of a standalone, less of a sequel. But it will be in the same town as My Rock and My Refuge, and you will get to see a lot of the same characters from it, but from a different angle. And it's also like 8 years later. So not a, 6 months down the road kind of thing.
Excellent. Okay. Well, and I love that they're standalone, so you can just pick out the one that you're like, okay, I think that one grabs my interest the most. And so then, I think that's just such a great way of setting up your series. It's something that I've learned the hard way through writing mine, and mine are all, you have to read them in order. And I'm like, oh, yep. Okay. So now when I say, the third one is set in an asylum, and people are like, ooh, that sounds really cool. And I'm like, but you have to read the first two. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like an anthology series almost, which sometimes you see on like TV series will do, like, this season is about this, but the next season has all new characters, but it's still kind of technically the same series. So I like to explore different times, different places, and different characters. I don't want to be tied always to the same like spot and things. So, and then it makes it easier, like you said, for readers, because you can just pick up the one that sounds interesting to you and start there.
So are they all? They're all Western though.
They're all Westerns.
They're all, but not necessarily 1800s. Or
so they run from just after the Civil War. 1866, I think, is Dancing in Donuts, and then they go all the way to Cloaked is technically the last one so far. It's 1883 or 4, I think. So kind of at that the classic era of the cowboy, which is like 65 to 85
Yeah.
in that 20 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I loved you did such a good job of incorporating the history with it and talking about like how so many of the cowboys came from the Civil War, right? A lot of that came out of
Yes.
the whole Western mindset, the whole, well, I've got a gun and so now I can do whatever I want with it is the attitude of a lot of them, and then others trying to keep the peace, and so you've
Right.
got Wyatt Earp and that whole thing and all of that. So we've got a couple people already saying these sound so good. They really are. I highly recommend that you check them out. They are so fun and so wonderful. And Lori says she's purchased already 1 to 3, and so TBR, excellent.
Very cool.
You're gonna love them. They're so good. I won't give anything away. So
I will. I probably will.
But yeah, I want to talk more about like your covers. So who is your cover artist? Because I love the covers.
My cover artist is my friend and also my sister-in-law,
Oh,
Erica
wonderful.
Ohlendorf. Yes, she is my brother's wife and happens to be a very talented digital artist, particularly, but just artist in general. And she, when I first said I want to start doing this, I knew she had done some book illustrations and things like that. And so I was like, hey, do you think you could come up with something like a little bit whimsical, but also, conveying that this is a Western, but that it's kind of a young adult kind of series. Just kind of, show me what you come up with. And if I really like where you're going with things, then I'll hire you as my cover artist. And she came up with Cloaked, which has, like the Little Red Riding Hood thing going on. And then you've got this wonderful, like, back in the distance guy kind of watching over her, and then like the mountains are his hat kind of. And she took some inspiration for that from like the original Great Gatsby cover.
Yes
Just with the eyes just watching you. And that's a huge thing. Like the wolf in this story is not a like literal wolf like this guy. He is a man who's up to no good. He's your villain. So she really wanted to kind of get that, and I love how it looks. It's like paper crafting almost,
exactly.
just really different and unique. So yeah, and that one worked so well. We just kind of kept that style for the rest.
Yeah. Well, I love that it's a very Americana. Like immediately you're like, yep, like the quilts and the how to do the buildings and all that kind of thing.
Yes.
Can you show a couple of the other ones? Do you have?
Sure. So then Dancing and Donuts.
Yeah.
Obviously you have dancing, and you have like the cowboy boot for the guy. And then we did a lot of research into what did dancing slippers look like in the 1860s, because you're not wearing ballet slippers, you're not wearing, sneakers. What are you wearing? And then she also incorporated, like, you have the silver and gold branches in 12 Dancing Princesses, and she's got that like echoed in the shoes there, and just lots of good fun movement, because that one's very lighthearted and comedic.
Absolutely. Yeah. I loved your main character. He was and part of it is being in first person, so like being in his head and everything.
Right.
You get to really hear how he approaches life. And it just, so he could be a little bit snarky sometimes, and just,
he has an attitude. Yes. But just this very fun outlook on life. I really loved writing him. He was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, and I also appreciated the recipe in the back. I was going to try to make the donuts before we did this, but I didn't get a chance to this morning. So I was like, it's good, because I'm like salivating for donuts now.
My kids say that's still their favorite of the researches that I've had to do for a book is when I was just trying out actual 1800s recipes for donuts. Like, how does this one work? How does this one work? Can I find one that is not too difficult for modern cooking and modern, ingredients and things, and kind of rewrite it so anybody who's never made donuts before, like me when I started out with that, will understand how to do it. My Rock and My Refuge actually has recipes at the back too for German bread, because the main character in this one is a German baker immigrant to the West, and the whole book is full of baking and bread. And so I put 2 recipes that are used in the book in the back of that too.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll have to do a live bake along at some point then. We'll have to make donuts together, because that sounds so good. Well, and I love finding old recipes. Like, that's one of the things that you can't see them right now. They're up there. That's my shelves. Where are they? think they're like right there. Those are my old cookbooks.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love flipping through those and finding. So okay, so Civil War recipes specifically.
Basically, yeah.
Do they have what I found is mostly books like pre-1900. They don't have how long to bake them or how hot the oven should be, that kind of thing.
Right. They will
Yeah.
either tell you nothing, they'll just be a
Right.
list of ingredients,
Right.
or they'll tell you really helpful things like bake until done in a hot oven.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, so that's why I did a lot of experimenting,
Yeah.
because it's like, okay, hot oven, is that like 350? Is that like 400? You know, until
Right.
done, does that mean golden brown? Does that, you know, yeah,
Yeah. Exactly.
definitely a lot of trying and testing, and oh, well, that one didn't really turn out. The first time I made donuts, we didn't really even eat them because I was not good yet at the frying part. You have to get the oil just the right temperature, and I
Yes.
didn't have it hot enough, and they were just grease soaked balls of dough. It was so
Yeah.
bad. So
Yeah.
bad. So I have very explicit instructions, like
Right.
in the recipe of like, here's how to tell if your oil is hot enough. If it, you know, don't make my mistake.
Right, exactly. Voice of experience. Well, and that's why homeschooling is so fun, right? Because then you
Yes.
get the kids involved and it's a research project and you're learning
Yes.
history and
Can be.
chemistry
Yep.
and all
Yep.
sorts of things at once. And that's why I love homeschooling because you can tie all of that together. Before I forget, we did have a question. Are they available in audiobooks? I don't think you have audiobooks yet.
No.
Right. Okay.
I may at some point. I actually know a very talented voice actor who does audiobooks, who if I was to make them into audiobooks. So most of my books are first person, so I would probably have him do the ones with a male perspective and then
Right.
find someone else for the ones from a woman's perspective. But
Yeah.
maybe someday. It's really cost prohibitive.
Yes.
Especially with like 4 books out already.
Yes.
So it would be, be several $1,000s to get it all set up. And
yes. Exactly.
someday, perhaps, I won't rule it out, but
yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah, because it's definitely, that's how, because unfortunately, like I started your book and then it took me several months to get back to it because it was an ebook. And so I forgot I had it. I just don't read ebooks. I normally am reading audiobooks lately. And so it was one of those like, oh, that's right. I have this book. I need to read it. And as soon as I got back into it, it was, I whipped through it. It was wonderful. But there's just something about reading on a screen. I just haven't quite gotten there yet. So
I almost never read ebooks because again, I forget I have them. If I have a physical book
right
sitting on my counter, I'm like, oh yes, this is the book I'm reading. Let me grab it and read a couple pages. But if it's just an ebook, I forget.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So yeah, you get me. You hear me. Let's see. What was one of my other questions? Oh, like the inspirations for your stories. So do you tend to have a story idea and then try to find a fairy tale that goes with it? Or are you reading a fairy tale to your kids and you're like, ooh, I have an idea for a story? Or do you have a list somewhere where you keep ideas, that kind of thing?
Yes to all of that.
Okay.
Sort of. Usually, so when I decided I was going to do a series, and I got the idea for Cloaked, and I was like, I would love to do Little Red Riding Hood because it's such a famous fairy tale. It lends itself really well to the Western setting and tropes and characters and things like that. Then I was like, okay, what else could I do? And I kind of just spent a couple weeks brainstorming and came up with 6 that I could do. That I was like, I could all of these. I have a good enough idea for them. They could be book length. Now it's going to be 7 because I have added the 7 swans to it. But
just fitting.
Which yes, it'll be good. But so yeah, it was like, okay, how could I retell this fairy tale as a Western without magic? And then characters would kind of come into my subconscious and be like, this could be about this person. I knew I wanted to try to retell Snow White without a traditional fair complected blonde, blue-eyed, or dark-haired, blue-eyed, whatever heroine. And I was reading a book to my kids actually for history about the Exodusters, which is a migration after Reconstruction of former slaves from the South who said, this isn't working. We're going to head west. And it was a huge movement of Black pioneers moving mostly to Kansas, but some a little farther west, some to Oklahoma too, and stuff like that. And I was like, why have I never read a book about that? Why are there no Black pioneer stories? I started looking for movies. There's one mainstream Hollywood movie about the Exodusters, which is from the 60s. It's called Buck and the Preacher, and it stars Sidney Poitier. And I'm like,
yeah.
Why, if there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Black pioneers,
right,
don't we know about this?
Yeah.
I want to write about that. And so then I was like, oh, what if I'd retell Snow White with a Black protagonist? She's in this, wagon train led by her father. And then what if instead of dwarves, I have 7 white kids? They're the other people that kind of help her, but they're very much looked at askance by other people. And can we make that work? So that was really exciting when that idea just kind of hit, and I was like, oh, that would be so good. The rest of them were more just like me going, well, if I was going to redo Cinderella, where would I do that? Where have I not written a book about yet? Where do I want to set it? Things like that.
So are they each set in different places then in the West?
They are, for the most part. Cloaked is in Wyoming. Dancing and Donuts is in Kansas. Right. One Bad Apple is in Missouri on the way to Kansas. It kind of ends up in Kansas. My Rock and My Refuge is Colorado, which then Seven Swans will also be Colorado. And then the one after that will be called Steadfast, and it's the Steadfast Tin Soldier. That one's going to be Texas. Okay. And then the last one will be Cinderella, and that is going to be along the Santa Fe Trail somewhere, so more like New Mexico area.
Wow. Okay. So where are you located? Are you out west?
No, I live in Virginia.
In Virginia. Well, if you need to come out here and do some Colorado research, I'm here. So
I was in Wyoming, Colorado, and Montana a couple months ago. We were out there for vacation. So
excellent. Yes. That's right. You guys did like the covered wagon thing, right?
We did. We stayed in a cabin that looked like a covered wagon for a couple of nights, but then we did Yellowstone and lots of fun stuff there, and a bunch of stuff in Cody, Wyoming, and
awesome,
good stuff like that.
And that's all research.
And a lot of it was research, and I did come back with quite a few books that are research. So in fact, at one point, I said to my husband, why are we toting around all these books that we have already read or that are things I picked up for research? And why are they taking up all this room in our van? We just shipped a box of books back to our house.
Right. Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. Oh, my goodness. That's wonderful. Oh, yep. I love her stuff. A fine quotation.
Oh, yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Shout out.
She's one of my favorites. And this is her Lucy Maud Montgomery mug. She's a definite influence on my writing, I would say. So
yeah. Mostly Anne or other things too?
Other things too. I do love Anne, but I also love the Blue Castle a lot. Yes. That is my favorite of hers. And then and my kids' favorite is Jane of Lantern Hill. They really love that one. And I find that one very fun too.
I haven't read that one. And Blue Castle, I need to reread that one. It's been years since I've read that one.
Jane of Lantern Hill is almost like a child's version of the Blue Castle. Like you have a lot of the same beginning with the oppressive matriarch who's suppressing a imaginative and interesting person and convincing them they are not imaginative and interesting. They're very boring. Only it's a 11-year-old girl instead. Okay. And then she obviously does not fall in love and move someplace else. Her father comes back into her life, takes her to Prince Edward Island for the summer, and she blossoms. So
excellent. That's interesting. That's like her carry through theme. I hadn't thought about that. That's because that's also Anne's story, right?
A little bit too, right?
Yeah. Where she's imaginative and at least Marilla especially kind of has an arc of realizing that is, she appreciates it, learns to appreciate it and all of that. Yeah. I love those books. So, so I was thinking, we'll take some of your questions from your street team. So Olivia R asked, once you finish the OUAW series, is that the one we're talking about?
Once Upon a Western. Yeah.
Once Upon a Western. There you go. Do you anticipate that you'll primarily keep writing Westerns or shift to more of a focus on other genres?
I will probably mostly still write westerns.
Okay.
But I will continue to write historical fiction.
Okay.
And
Yes.
mostly westerns. I do have several others. Either I do have one fully complete western that's not a retelling that I would love to edit or send to an editor and put out at some point. And then I have a half-written post-Civil War story, and some other stuff like that. So, yeah.
Okay. So excellent. So, but all westerns.
But mainly westerns.
Okay.
Mainly westerns.
Yeah.
So the occasional. What I'm writing right now is actually a retelling of Hamlet, set in 1940s California. So still historical fiction, but very, very different. And this one I will not be marketing as young adult.
Okay.
It's still clean. It's still Christian fiction, but it's much darker, and you have a lot of drinking going on because it's California in the 1940s.
Yeah. Well, and Hamlet isn't necessarily the most family-friendly story.
Right. I mean, there are things going on that we just have to call out and say, no, that's wrong, and that is kind of the point of it. Is y'all should stop doing these things because it causes problems.
Right. So, oh man, that sounds good. I love retellings of Shakespeare. I love when because I think that it's almost like retelling a fairy tale. At this
in some
point,
ways, yeah, you have the epic tropes and so much familiarity with the stories in our collective consciousness.
So people can capture all those references and have that feeling of, I think that's why Shakespeare has become, is so famous as he is because it's like that fairy tale thing where it's familiar enough that it feels like home. It feels like, okay, I recognize the story. I know where it's going, but it's fun to see it twisted and retold in a different way. Yeah. Oh, that'll be fun to read. I look forward to that one. So Kyle H asked, were there any particular Western films that have influenced your writing style? That's what I was wondering too.
Very much so. In fact, Western movies influence me much more than Western books, to be honest.
Okay.
I have, in the last 10 years or so, I have read a lot more of Louis L'Amour and Zane Grey and authors like that, but I did not read them much like growing up or even in my 20s and into my 30s. But I've watched Westerns all my life. I mean, my earliest movie watching memory is a Western. And so I have a lot of Western movies that definitely influenced me, especially with like themes, like the Civil War heroes, going out into the West, movies like The Searchers, Gunfight in Abilene, The Proud Rebel, where you have all of those deal with the aftermath of the Civil War. What did that do to people? How did they deal with it? How did having this huge expanse of wilderness to go out into and kind of tame, how did that help? Was that helpful? Was that not helpful? Depending on the person. So those definitely. Also just movies about like families, Sons of Katie Elder. You've got all the four brothers, that family dynamic. The Rare Breed, of about a mother and a daughter. Proud Rebel again is a father and a son. The Lone Ranger, the 2013 version, it's about, it's two brothers kind of at the core of it. And just exploring those family dynamics is always fascinating to me. And so you give me a Western with that and I will kind of glom onto it.
Excellent. And you said, so when I referenced Maverick, I was actually thinking of the Mel Gibson film. I actually have never seen the original TV show, but you that's what you,
Yes. I really love the original TV show. 50s and 60s Western TV shows are just a pure delight. They are so wonderful. And that is a kind of a little of the vibe I go for in my books, like that, it's going to be family friendly. Yes, there will be some Western violence, but it's not going to be gory. It's not going to be, belabored. There will be some romance, but you're not going to go past some kissing and there's not going to be cussing, things like that. And just that, but so many of them, like The Big Valley, Bonanza, Maverick, The Lone Ranger, they're shows that kids enjoy watching, but their parents also really enjoy. Like there's meat to them. So that's,
I'll have to look that. Do you know where can you watch that? The original?
So the original Maverick, I don't know if it's streaming anywhere because I'm not a big streaming person. Like I don't have Netflix. I do have Disney Plus, but I don't have Amazon Prime. I have it on DVD. I have
on DVD. I'll have to look through our library. I bet they would have it.
They might. Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely that you're like the third person who's been like, oh, have you watched the TV show? It's really
Oh,
good. If you like
it
the
is so
movie,
funny.
you'll love the
It
TV
is so
show.
funny. And James Garner is just devastatingly
Right.
handsome. I mean, you just got to be like, of course he became a movie star. There's no question that he will
Right.
be. Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. So are there anything other than Westerns that have influenced you? Like, I don't know, like other retold fairy tales or anything that,
Not a lot of those. I
yeah.
don't read a ton of fantasy, and most of the time fairy tale retellings end up being fantasy.
Yeah.
But definitely authors just who really are good at capturing life, like L.M.
Mhm.
Montgomery, Jane Austen,
Yes.
Louis L'Amour to some extent. Just that. Oh, Laura Ingalls Wilder, just
Yes.
really good at saying this is what life is like. And I'm endlessly fascinated by how did you do laundry? How did you,
Yes.
you made your own cheese? Wow. How did you make a bed? How did you, dance? What was your dancing like? What was and history like that fascinates me. And so I really love authors who can capture just everyday stuff going on in their characters' lives.
Exactly. And reminding us that it really hasn't changed, right? People are
Right.
people,
Customs can change,
right.
fashions change, tastes change. People don't.
Right.
Human nature has been the same for all of human history. And so you might be wearing different looking clothes and your hats might look kind of funny and you might be eating weird food, but you're just people just like us.
Exactly. That's why I love historical fiction.
Me too.
It's also comforting, right? Especially, when things are happening in our modern day world, it's so easy to say, oh, this is the worst it's ever been. It's like, no, it's so comforting to look back and go,
Yes,
no.
yes. I remember a couple of years ago, something was going on in the news and it was like almost like a catchphrase going around. Americans are the most divided they have ever been in American history. I'm like, have you heard of the American Civil War?
Right.
Okay, because we were literally split in half and shooting each other
Right.
in a war. So I'm really sorry. This is not even true. This is not even kind of close to true. This is not even close to like the civil rights movement, how divided Americans were, or the Vietnam War and the protests of that. I understand you're upset, but please don't say really stupid things like Americans have never been this divided before.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's why it's so fun going back and reading and writing those historical fictions and finding those and reminding people of that. Here, Dean Sue said, nothing new under the sun, right? That's like my favorite phrase.
Yes.
I'm always saying
Yes.
that.
Ecclesiastes is my favorite book in the Bible. And
Yes.
it's so reassuring because you just go back to it and you're like, oh, there's nothing new under the sun. What is good for a man to do? Eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of his labor that God has given him. Just quit fussing.
Exactly. Yeah. And same with the Psalms. I've been really comforted by the Psalms lately because I'm reminded that it's okay to lament.
Yes.
It's okay to, be discouraged. That is a natural emotion. It's what you do with it.
Right.
That changes it. Right. But, and coming back to that hope, right? Thankfully, as Christians, we have this hope that we can turn to.
Right.
And that's what, hopefully it would make it different, right? For us, a different experience than for non-Christians right now. But reading the Psalms and going, okay, no, it's okay to be like really down, but then he comes down and then he comes back up, right?
Right.
I might be way down here, but like Job, stories of Job and
right.
The Lord gives, the Lord takes away, blessed be the name of the Lord.
Right.
That has to be the turnaround point. And I saw that in your book too. Like even in Dancing and Donuts, even though it's a lighter one, it's still that, they had that great conversation. I highlighted it. Let me find it. They have this whole conversation about, why, the Lord helps those who help themselves. That wonderful, I hear that all the time.
Yes.
And, they had this great conversation about, and then he brings it back to the Civil War and all of that. And I won't read all of it because I highlighted like the whole thing. So I was like, oh yes, this is so spot on. I loved that. You had so many great little just little highlight moments where either it tied back into the original fairy tale and I was just like, oh yeah, like all your descriptions of the trees, the magical painting and the, without it being magic, there's no magic in it, but it's still that, there's a magic to life itself, right?
Right. Yes,
And
yes, yes.
yeah,
I envision that, and I get goosebumps just envisioning that room and just being like,
yes,
it's not magical. It's not a magical force, but it
right,
looks, it evokes magical feelings. It evokes that awe and that sort of whimsical wonder kind of thing.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I still, and in that way, I feel like you still, like you said, so many retold fairy tales are take on a fantasy element, but yours do
Mhm.
not. But they still capture that feeling that evoke that.
Yes, yes. Every once in a while, there will be something that you're like, okay, this is almost not quite realistic, but because it's a fairy tale retelling,
Right,
like it kind of it works. That
exactly,
you know, so somebody lands in exactly the right spot at the right time,
right.
or um, just happens to be find the right thing at the right time, and yeah,
Right. Which still, I mean, that's true to life though.
which does happen. Yes, yes,
Yeah, there are coincidences and then there's, the God things where you're just like,
right,
okay, that's got to be God because there's no other reason why that person would walk in right now,
right, yep,
that kind of
yep.
thing. So yeah, so I love that. Sky asked, what is something that keeps you writing?
The fact that if I don't write down the stories in my head, I can't read them.
Exactly. Yeah, write what you want to read.
Write what I want to
Absolutely.
read. I think Beverly Cleary said something like, "If you don't see the book you want to read on the shelf, then you must write it."
Hmm.
And that's a lot of what happens. Is I have stories in my head and I love them and I want to read them. I want to read this Western set with retelling something, or a Western that has these themes, and
Hmm.
I don't find it. So okay, I will write it,
Yeah.
and then I can read it, and then other people can read it too. But
Exactly. Well, and that's the whole point, right? Is that you write it and then you're like, oh, there are other people who want to read this too. Like,
right, right.
and I love that you're reading it to your kids. That's just so I haven't been able to do that yet. I haven't written something that my kids can read with me other than my children's books. I have children's books that I've written, but I haven't published any of them.
Okay.
So they help me with those, but all my murder mysteries and stuff, they'll be like, well, can't we read? Like I just finished a first draft of a book that I'll be releasing at Christmas time, and it's a Christmas cozy mystery, but
Mhm.
it's a murder mystery.
Right.
So like it's very clean, but it's
But
yeah,
it's still not quite kid
but it's
appropriate.
still
Yes.
not right. I'm still
Yeah.
like, what? I wouldn't have you read this, right? It's more to evoke that Christmas feeling amongst adults to remind you
Right.
of the magic of Christmas. But it's not for kids, and so I'm missing that part of it. And so I love that your books. As soon as I finished reading it, I was like, oh, I could read this with my kids. This would be fun to read with them, and then we can make donuts together. So, yes, something that keeps you writing. So do you find that yeah, so writing what you want to read, writing like for your kids. Do you think of that as I'm writing for my kids
A
to
little
read?
bit, a little bit.
Yeah,
I mean, they definitely will bug me. Like, when are you going to finish the book so we can read it?
yeah,
What, are you finished? Are you close? Are you
right.
finished? It is our turn. We want it.
Yeah.
But they are. I'm not going to say that they are my ideal reader exactly.
Okay.
Like in my head as my. But I definitely have them, especially when I'm editing. Like, I will sometimes write things a little more strongly and then back them off a little bit
Right.
to say, my kids are going to read this, and so maybe we won't see the axe fall and kill the guy, or we won't see what happens if you drink poison. We'll just pan
Yeah.
away a little bit.
Yeah.
um and so that definitely kind of informs them a little bit.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So Elizabeth B asked, all your published works so far are retellings. Do you have plans for non-retellings in the future, or will you stick to more retellings? Perhaps the Shakespeare series next. All right. Somehow she knows what you've got planned.
She does she's on my street team, so she knows what I'm working
Excellent.
on. um so like I said earlier, like I do probably plan to mostly write westerns, but not all fairy tale retellings. Like, once I'm done with this series, I think I'm done with fairy tale retellings.
Okay.
That could change someday in the future, but I don't have more plans for this. But I do have a complete first draft of a standalone western young adult, called Fickle Creek, and then I have full like full novel length stories in my head for at least two other westerns, and things that could get spun into a full book for a couple of more.
Okay.
So those, once I'm done with this series, those can happen, hopefully. I also have a half-written, very interesting post-Civil War novel set in the mountains of North Carolina where I grew up.
Okay.
And that probably will be a little more adult too. But it's not a fairy tale retelling. It's an original story. I don't know that I will ever retell anything else of Shakespeare's. I won't say I won't ever, because it could happen. Could get inspired. But I don't know any of Shakespeare's plays as intimately as I know Hamlet.
Yeah.
Hamlet has been my obsession since I was 17. So I mean, I've read it dozens of times. I've seen close to 24 different versions and read many retellings, and it's very, very dear to my heart. So that one, just writing a retelling of it, just kind of happened. I wrote it as a Christmas present for a friend.
Excellent.
just flowed.
Excellent.
Could I sometime write a retelling of like Much Ado About Nothing? I probably could. I could probably do that.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, I really like that one. I could maybe do Taming of the Shrew.
Yeah,
that one is a lot of fun too. But I don't know that I will.
Yeah.
I don't have plans to.
Okay. Excellent. And then back over here, we had a question. Just the description here I see is a Christian author. So yeah, do you consider your books Christian fiction, or do you consider them just they're written from a Christian worldview?
I consider them Christian fiction.
Okay.
Some of them have more Christian content than others.
Yeah.
My Rock and My Refuge is more explicitly Christian. It has a lot more struggling with some faith issues and with how people are relating to each other when one has a stronger faith than the other and things like that.
Right.
But all of them have Christian characters. They go to church, they pray, they read their Bibles, they try to live according to God's word. They, I have not written any conversion storylines in this series. Like, I think there's a lot of that out there, and it hasn't fit with any of these stories yet. But they're definitely Christian fiction in that they are by a Christian author about characters who are Christians.
Right.
So, yeah.
But I also think, because like my books are not Christian fiction, but they definitely, the further you get into the series, you'll see that they have more discussions. And that's partially I decided to write in 1901 because I was like, well, it's historical enough that people will generally accept that they all went to church and that they're going to quote from the Bible, because that
was the culture.
What you did. Right. Yeah. That was the culture. That was the society. And so I feel like you can almost get away with it, right? You sneak Christianity in there a little bit.
Right. I mean, you wouldn't say like Jane Austen's books are not Christian fiction.
Right.
She's a minister's daughter, but her characters go to church. They quote the Bible. They read sermons out loud to each other for fun. It's because that is the world she was living in. That was the culture she was living in. And so she's not. And
it's honestly one of those tags that I feel like is not beneficial at this point.
Sometimes.
Sometimes it can be like, sometimes it's helpful for other Christians because then I know, okay, it's clean, right? It's going to be safe. Right. I can read this. This is going to be fine. But sometimes there's some really difficult themes in Christian fiction that like I'll have a hard time reading. I'll be like, oh, it's from a Christian author, so I can do this, and then it'll go really dark, really fast, and I'm just like, wow, okay, that surprised me. But so sometimes I feel like the Christian fiction label, like I love seeing so many indie authors who are Christian writing not technically Christian fiction, because as an indie author, right, we don't get labeled that necessarily, right? So we can sneak through a little bit more and get into people's hands, and they start reading the book, and then they get further in, and they're surprised by faith, right? Surprised by joy. Whole C.S. Lewis thing, right? And speaking of myth, this week I'm doing an interview discussing. We just did a buddy read of Till We Have Faces.
Oh, that is a fascinating.
C.S. Lewis, there's a myth retold, that fairy tale retelling that goes really, and that one definitely is a conversion story. That is a
right.
Yes, it's very
cool. And it does go quite dark and quite deep.
It does. For a while there. It does. Which is necessary because you have to have the darkness before the light, right? And it really is a dark world, and we really do need God's light shining through it. So, so I was just wondering, like, what are your thoughts? So how would you label Christian fiction, I guess? Yeah,
That
I
is
just out of curiosity, don't you know?
right. And I tend to think of a book as Christian fiction if it is not just from the Christian worldview, but that it has Christian characters whose faith plays some role in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So, like in Cloaked, the Little Red Riding character, like she has a psalm that her dad would quote to her when things were hard that actually helped him get through life as a soldier in the Civil War, and
Wow.
that helps her through things. And she prays about difficult situations and finds, not just comfort, but even in ideas for how to deal with things that way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of, to me, what if it's Christian fiction, then the Christianity has to impact the story somehow.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's where I've been surprised lately is I've come across some indie publishing houses that are trying to do Christian fiction in a different way. And so sometimes it feels like there's no Christian themes in it, right? Where you're just like, really, this is considered Christian fiction, but
Right.
there was
Once in a while I hit like Catherine Rie, her earlier books are much more Christian fiction.
yeah.
Especially like the first 4 or 5. And then her last, I would say 3 or 4 books, there haven't been a lot of like explicitly Christian scenes or themes. You might
Right.
have characters who talk about like, oh, my brother's a pastor or something like that, but it's
Right.
not as overt. But then you still see like redemption arcs. You still see
Yes.
people struggling with sins or with temptations and overcoming that or succumbing to that kind of thing.
Right. Right. Which those redemption arcs, those are the ones I love the most. I love reading those. They just hit me so hard, and it's just like it's so beautiful to read a story like that. And it's interesting because like my husband and I have been getting more into studying like character arcs and the arcs that we go through our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Cam Weiland wrote this great book about like the maiden cycle, the hero cycle, and then you go through the queen and king, crone and mage, or mage and crone, I think, cycles. And it's basically, it doesn't matter male, female, we all go through them. It's all, maiden is when you're in high school and college and really discovering who you are and defining yourself. And then you go through the hero cycle. And so seeing that, Andrew and I have been talking about it as a Christian parallel, how you go through these different parts of your faith and different steps in your faith, right? You're a baby Christian first. And what does this mean? Or, now I've accepted Christ and you're overflowing and you're so excited. And then you kind of go through your hero cycle of what does this really mean? Right? How is this going to change my life? How am I going to, defeat the giant? And usually you have a mentor who, dies halfway through and that kind of thing. Like it's the whole hero cycle and everything. And then queen, king, and all the way through. And it's so interesting to see that in stories and be, but seeing that in Christian fiction, how it's different, or books, fiction written by Christians versus fiction written by non-Christians.
Right.
It tends to go, even when they try to have that redemption arc, it's like there's something missing. It's like I know what it is.
Yes.
Do you know what it is?
Yes. So I've never read or watched Game of Thrones, but I do know a good bit about it. And I was reading, or my husband was reading, an article recently about how George R.R. Martin is really having a hard time finishing this series. He's been stuck on this final book for like 10 years now. And they were saying, it's probably because he's written this very nihilistic, everything is meaningless, there's no good, there's no bad, and everything is relative worldview. How do you have a satisfying, maybe not even happy, but satisfying ending if there's no good, there's no bad, there's no good guys, there's no bad guys, everything is meaningless? Of course he's having trouble finishing that up, as opposed to like J.K. Rowling, who wrote a magical world where there are very clear good guys and bad guys, and from the outset the ending of this has to be the bad guy is permanently defeated, the good guys win, whether or not the main character has to sacrifice himself, or it's worth it to defeat that evil. And I'm like, that's makes a lot of sense to me. Like, how can you have a happy ending if you don't have good and evil right and wrong. It's storytelling is about restoring balance, moral balance to the
Yes.
universe. And if you don't have a moral balance to your universe,
Yeah.
that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like especially that's why I'm drawn to mystery, specifically murder mystery, right? and the whole idea of in fact I think I even put that Anna Catherine Green says something about that, and so I put it in my book because it was exactly my thought. Only she wrote it, 80 years earlier, 100 years earlier. But the idea that that we're drawn to that sense of there must be justice, right?
Yes.
There must be, murder is bad. We all know that. So
Right.
how do we end that story though?
Yeah.
And that's what's so interesting about writing mystery is coming across like Father Brown or other ones where they really question that, where they kind of okay, is there another way to end this where it's not where because like Father Brown, there's several characters that go through they redeem themselves, they go through redemption arcs, and so it doesn't always end with the murderer getting hung or whatever. It's
right.
Sometimes that they are given a second chance and they have that redemption, which is so I love that. So
that happens in Sherlock Holmes too. There are a couple right where he will let the perpetrator go.
Yes,
he will say to Watson, I think we would do more harm than good if we sent this character who has this guy who has never stolen before. If we send him to prison, he'll be a hardened criminal when he comes out. Exactly. He knows what he did was wrong. He has paid a lot of suffering for it already. Go somewhere far away and don't do this again. Go and sin no more. And I am not the law. I don't have a legal responsibility necessarily to say you have to go to jail, and you can have a second chance at life.
Right. Exactly.
But yes, I love mysteries. Mysteries are my favorite genre to read. Love to read them. But writing them is very hard.
It is.
I've written a couple others besides Dancing and Donuts, and I know it's not an intuitive way for me to write, because I have to know ahead of time what the bad guys are doing, like the whole way along, so that I can have the good guys, figure it out as it goes along. And that is not super fun for me, to be honest. So
do you write more linearly?
I write very linearly.
Yeah.
I will write start to end. My whole first draft is just I begin at the beginning, and when I get to the end, I stop.
Okay.
And I have tried like outlining a couple of times. I cannot outline.
Okay.
If I have a total outline, I lose all interest.
Okay.
I don't care anymore. I know how it ends. I know what happens. That's it. I do need to know. I'm not a total pantser. Okay. I do need to know like the basic trunk of the story. If it was like a tree, I need to know the tree trunk. I need to know what shape it's going to be. I need to know how it begins. I need to know how it ends. It's best if I already have like my ending scene thought out.
Okay.
And I need to know some stuff that happens along the way. But then filling in like the leaves and the color of it, that comes as I write. Okay. So I have an endpoint and I'm going toward that. But there's a lot of discovery in the first draft of, oh, I didn't realize I had set this up. And And then in the second draft, once my editor sends back notes, her notes generally are, here are all the things you set up throughout the story that you didn't follow up on, but if you follow up on these things, it's going to be really cool. So just take that to its natural conclusion.
Exactly. So actually that goes with this one. So your street team, is that your beta readers? Those are the people who read it ahead of time? No.
My street team are called the Outlaws, and they are a group of people who really like my books and who go out and shout about them on the street, basically.
Okay.
They will hype the books. They will share my Instagram posts if they're on Instagram. They will tell their friends and neighbors and things like that. So right now my street team is capped. When I do another Once Upon a Western, I'll probably open it up and add a few more people to it. But But I will probably also do some kind of hype team, like for the book I'm writing right now, Murder Most Foul, which is the Hamlet retelling. Some have separate, launch team kind of thing for that. But they are not my beta readers. I do have a couple beta readers besides my kids. But they are just trusted friends who are also writers that I know are going to give me feedback. Gonna find me plot holes that I never see myself, because I never see plot holes. I'm really bad at that. In my own books, in other people's books. Movies, it doesn't matter. I'm just like, this is how the story goes. This is how the story goes.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Which, before I forget, you also have a reading blog, right? Where a website.
Yes.
So what do you like to read for that? Do you just kind of randomly choose things, or?
It's just book reviews mainly of whatever I happen to be reading.
Yeah.
I am a mood reader. And so you'll notice little trends of, oh, she's very, very into like Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler right now. And then, oh, now she's reading fluffy Jane Austen retellings. And then, oh, now it's historical fiction about the Middle Ages because she got in a mood for that. Yeah.
Right.
But it's really just, it's reviews of whatever I'm reading at the time. Right now, there's a whole bunch of middle grade fiction reviews up there because I'm teaching a lit class this fall or this year for our homeschool co-op. And so I was finding books for that and quick pre-reading them so that I knew they were appropriate. I knew what themes I could kind of focus on. And
so yeah, if you guys are interested in reading more reviews, Rachel's got a great collection. She's got, man, how long have you been doing it? It's a couple of years.
I'm going to say it's 10 or 11 years.
Yeah. I was going to say.
I think it was 2013. Like my other blog, my main blog, Hamlet's Soliloquy, that one's been going since 2002.
Okay.
So like 21 years now. But the book blog, I think I started it in 2012, 2013, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So it has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of book reviews. And fairly early into the process, like within the first year or two, I started putting like a movie style rating on them, what I would rate this if it was a movie. So whether it would be PG-13 or PG, what kind of content does it have? Just because I find that helpful when reviewers do that, because then I know, what is it going to have in it? Do I want to deal with this?
Exactly.
Yeah. Am I going to be shocked suddenly to get 3/4 of the way through this book and then discover, now we're skimming. Okay, finally it's safe to read again. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Which I've had a lot of that lately. I had several books that I started reading and then I was like, nope, okay, I'm done. Yeah. I've just I've been DNFing a lot because I'm just like, I don't have the mood or the space or the brain space to, I don't need that in my life.
I don't have the time. So if I'll give a book 5 chapters or 50 pages, whichever is longer. If I'm not into it by then, unless it's something I'm reading like to teach for a class or, because it's good for me. I read a little Charles Dickens every year, just like I eat a little kale every year because it's good for me. But most of the time, if it is fun reading, if I'm just not into it, I'm sorry, I will move on to something else.
Exactly. All right, folks, if you have any other last questions, let me know what they are. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Rachel, so much for coming. I so enjoyed this. This is an excellent conversation. So be sure to pick up Rachel's books. Where can we find them?
You can find them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Sometimes Books A Million has the paperbacks, sometimes they don't. But the ebooks are only on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, so you can get them for Kindle or Nook, either way. Northwestern Publishing House, if you're a Lutheran like me, they actually have the paperbacks on their website too. So, or you can order them from me. Just email me, or I do have an order form that my Instagram links to, that you can just tell me what you want, and it tells you how much they cost and stuff. So.
Perfect. I need to pick up some signed copies so that way I actually have them on my shelf.
Yes. That way you can get signed copies and all of that good stuff. Yep.
Excellent. All right. Wonderful. All right. Yeah. Everyone's just saying thank you. And it was wonderful. And thank you.
That's my editor, Deborah Corin, right there. She is my editor.
Excellent.
So
there you go.
That's her.
Oh, editors are amazing.
They are. She's also my best friend. So it's a very unique relationship.
It helps when you're, my editor is a friend from college that we reconnected over the years, and it makes it so much easier. I feel like I can be so much more, okay, here's what I'm going for. Did I succeed? He's like, yes or no. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Bye.